Wow, incredible. It's really out there. Megan stared at me like that, and I opened my mouth, my face turning red with shame. I'm sorry to ask, but could you clean it up? Of course, Megan responded, reaching out to the object in front of me. My name is Ken Johnson. At 25, I'm a labor and social security attorney. Currently, I'm working in a law firm. But truthfully, I've been considering a move to a different firm. The persistent attention from Agnes, the daughter of the head of the firm, has been causing me quite a bit of distress. Hey, Ken, want to go to a movie together this weekend? Agnes, I'm sorry, I have plans. Oh, really? You said the same thing last time, you know. Agnes is a well-educated young lady and a flamboyant beauty. If you married her, you'd be set for life. My colleagues often tell me, but no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to fall for her. However, I can't exactly brush her off either. I'm really in a pickle. But before I even consider a career move, I need to clean up my apartment. Moving would be a hassle. I have always been bad at housework, and my whole room had become a garbage dump. I used to justify it by saying no one else was coming over anyway, but that excuse isn't going to fly anymore. My mother, who still lives in my hometown, called to say she was coming to visit. Ken, I'm coming to visit. It's been a while. Hearing these words over the phone sent me into a full-blown panic, trying to avoid the impending disaster. No. If we're going to meet, I'll come over to your place. Oh, don't start with that. I bet your apartment is still a mess, isn't it? If that's the case, I'll just have to clean it for you. My mom knows me too well. She raised me as a single mother, working tirelessly to give me everything she could. Now, she's remarried and leading a comfortable life, but the years leading up to my adulthood were filled with hardships. I have the utmost respect and admiration for her. Once, when she made an unexpected visit, I had forgotten to hide a photo album of a swimsuit model, and I was embarrassed beyond belief. I cannot afford to repeat such an embarrassment. With this thought in mind, I made up my mind to apply for the dispatch of a housekeeper service. Depending on the price, they could spend nearly an entire day cleaning the entire house. I would prefer a thorough clean immediately, but for now, I decided to try out their 1-hour trial. The following weekend, a housemaid was dispatched to my apartment. When I answered the door at the sound of the intercom, standing before me was a surprisingly young and stunningly beautiful housemaid, dressed in a neat frilly apron. Her long black hair and sharp double eyelids were accentuated by the frills of her apron. Wow, she's really beautiful. I was so taken aback that I froze for a moment. Then, the housemaid began to introduce herself with a graceful voice. My name is Megan Smith. Nice to meet you. Upon hearing her name, the beautiful woman in front of me instantly linked with a schoolgirl dressed in uniform I had met in the past. Yes, Megan and I had indeed met before. It was 3 years ago. I was a senior in college then. My university held a visiting day, and I was one of the presenters on stage. Being from a financially disadvantaged family, I had attended the university as a special scholarship student, with all my tuition fees waived. There was only one such scholarship available per year, making it highly competitive. When I spoke about this special scholarship slot on stage, Megan came to me during Q&A session. I learned a lot from your talk today. With these words, Megan flashed a charming smile from behind her glasses. Although she wore no makeup, she looked incredibly lovely in her school uniform. If that's the case, then my efforts paid off. Are you also aiming for the special scholarship? Yes. My family is a single-parent household, so we're financially struggling. Listening to her, I realized that our family circumstances were quite similar. Impressed by her crisp manner of speaking and earnest personality, I truly wanted to support her. I see. We also have trial classes at our university. It could be helpful in getting the scholarship if you can make an impression on the professors there. Good luck. Thank you very much. From then on, Megan continued to participate eagerly in the trial classes. Her dedication was genuinely sincere, and although from a distance, I kept watching over her. In hindsight, I might have been harboring a tender affection for the young Megan. So when I heard from the professors at the time of my graduation that Megan was selected as a scholarship student, I was overjoyed. I thought I would never see her again as my job was located out of state, but I never thought I would see her again in this way. She was supposed to be a junior in college. Why was she working for a housekeeping service? Was she working part-time on days she didn't have classes? I was tempted to ask for details, but Megan didn't seem to acknowledge my presence and wouldn't meet my eyes. Where should I clean? Being asked professionally, I decided to have her clean the entrance in the hallway. Megan began cleaning swiftly and skillfully. Despite her slender legs stretching out from her skirt, her bosom was surprisingly ample, catching my eye. As I was enamored by her good looks, an hour passed in the blink of an eye. The entrance and the hallway were sparkling clean, as if transformed. It was a job only a pro could do. When her work was done, Megan made quick work-related remarks and left hurriedly. Still, I wanted to have a proper conversation with Megan. I requested the housekeeping service company to have Megan come again next week. This time it would be for a full day. I was prepared for her to refuse, but I was told that Megan had agreed. It seemed she hadn't entirely disliked me. With my heart pounding in anticipation of the next weekend, a visibly upset Megan, her cheeks puffy and flushed, came to my house. "Megan, what on earth happened?" Megan opened her mouth slowly, her gaze fixed on the ground. Do you remember me, sir?" "Of course I do. I've been worried about how you're doing ever since I graduated from college." "Sir," Megan looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears. I thought it best to get her calm and talk, so I ushered her into the living room. After making some tea, Megan thanked me and began to recount in detail what had happened. "Actually, my mom hit me yesterday." "What, your mom did?" "Yes, my mom, she's what you would call toxic. She objected to me going to college, and so I couldn't continue my studies." "You're kidding. After all the hard work you put in to earn a full scholarship." "I studied like crazy because my mom said she would let me study if the tuition was covered. But it seems like she just can't stand to see me happy. Since I gave up going to college, I've been working part-time jobs and offering housekeeping services to make ends meet." "I see. Are you still living with your mom?" "Actually, whenever my mom is in a bad mood or brings a man home, she forces me out of the apartment. So, I essentially spend more than half of the year living in comic book cafes." Megan said that, letting out a deep sigh. I was at a loss for words, taken aback by the severity of Megan's living conditions. Even if she worked her fingers to the bone, saving money would be tough when staying in comic book cafes. So I proposed something to Megan. "You don't have to agree if it's a burden, but Megan, would you like to live here?" "What? I'll provide a room, and you don't have to pay rent. It's a small apartment, but I think it's more comfortable than a comic book cafe." "But wouldn't that be a bother for you? If it's too much, how about you do some housework in exchange? Of course, you don't have to push yourself if you're busy with work." It was a proposal that slipped out in the spur of the moment, and I regretted it a bit, thinking it might be too bold. After all, getting a proposal to live together from a man you haven't seen for 3 years might be a bit off-putting. But Megan, with a smile on her face, was happy about the proposal. "Thank you so much." No, I'm the one who should be thanking you. I'll start cleaning up right away." With that, Megan headed to the kitchen with a spring in her step. The kitchen was a mess, and in particular, the kitchen hood was so black with dirt it was unbearable to look at. "Wow, that's a lot coming out." When I removed the cover of the vent hood, a thick glob of oil dripped down. Seeing Megan stare at that with wide eyes, I opened my mouth, my face flushing with embarrassment. "Could you clean it up for me, please?" "Of course." And with that, Megan reached out. Thanks to Megan, my once dirty house became stunningly clean in just one day. I had plans to treat Megan to a meal outside as a way to say thank you, but in the middle of that, suddenly the doorbell rings. With a bad feeling in my gut, I opened the door, and sure enough, there was my mom. "Hey, Ken, I was just in the neighborhood so I thought I'd drop by." Mom, you should have told me you were coming." My mom's eyes went wide when she saw Megan coming out from the back. "Oh my, what a beauty, Ken. You don't deserve her. Where did you meet such a wonderful woman, Ken?" "She's a junior from my university who came as a maid service dispatch." "Huh, what are you saying?" My mom stood there, mouth agape, looking at me blankly. Anyway, after letting my mom into the house, Megan explained the situation. Once my mom understood the situation, she laughed merrily. "Aha, I see. That makes sense. I mean, there's no way a stunning girl like her would date Ken, right?" "Mom, that's enough. By the way, I bought some beef for dinner tonight. Would you like to join us, Megan?" "Yes, absolutely. Actually, please let me cook it." "Really? Well, I might take your word for it then." Using the ingredients my mom brought, Megan served us a delicious stew just under an hour later. "This is amazing. It's like something you'd get in a restaurant." "It's true. It's incredibly good." I, who usually just ate ready-to-eat supermarket food, was deeply moved by the homemade meal. To top it all off, Megan even made pancakes using ingredients from my kitchen. "Whoa, this is delicious. I'll pay you. Can you make it again sometime? I want my husband to taste this too." No, I'm not a professional. I can't accept your money." No, it's so delicious. You're practically a professional." "Right. I'd love to try some other pastries too." And so, after eating her delicious food, my mom left our house in a great mood. Our family home is a 2-hour drive away, so I'm sure she'll visit us often from now on, mostly to taste Megan's cooking. Sorry, moms like that. She may drop in unexpectedly. It's a relief having you around, Megan, or else I get scolded for the state of the house. Haha, your mom is very lively. It's been a long time since I had so much fun. Watching you and your mom was also amusing. Megan's words made my face turn red. Shoot, I wanted to act cool in front of Megan, but mom always throws me off my game. And so, our shared living experience began. Despite working multiple jobs, Megan managed all the household chores perfectly. She served different delicious meals every day, and even packed homemade lunches for me. My coworkers were envious of the high-quality lunches, saying, "You've got a good one." Although she's not my girlfriend, I feel fortunate just having such a wonderful woman by my side. My mom has been coming over frequently since then, eating Megan's home-cooked meals with a delighted face. Today, she bought a chocolate cake that Megan made and took it home. Mom, you're buying at quite the pace. Megan, don't push yourself too hard, okay? It's fine. I enjoy baking. Besides, I think your mom is trying to support me. Huh. I think she's giving me money under the pretense of buying sweets because she knows about my circumstances. I should be the one saying thank you. Am I really allowed to be this happy? Said Megan, as tears streamed down her cheeks. Hearing her words, I too felt a warmth welling up in my chest. My mom just wants to be of any help to Megan, even if it's just a little. I gently patted Megan's crying back. It's okay. You've had a tough time until now, Megan. You've saved me as well, and my mom adores you. I'm so happy, Ken. Megan trusts me, but our relationship is based on business. I have no intention to press for a relationship because of that. Megan is still young and beautiful, full of infinite potential. There's no way a woman of her caliber should always stay with me. She should find a better life and a partner far better than me. Even though I think this, the thought of an end to this happiness makes my chest hurt. The following week, the doorbell rang again. Expecting my mom, I opened the door, only to find Agnes standing there. Caught off guard by her sudden visit, Agnes had a look of discontent on her face. Ken, You're letting a maid service woman live here. You dared to let such a woman into your house, leaving me out. Hey, Agnes, please calm down. Ignoring my pleas, Agnes barged into the house. Then she began hurling insults at Megan. How dare you? There are limits to being impudent, barging into someone's house just because you're a maid. Get out of here now. Eek. With that, Agnes tried to pull on Megan's apron. My body moved instinctively at the sight, and I stood in front of Agnes. Behind me, Megan was trembling with fear. Ken, what are you? Even if it's Agnes, I won't allow it. She didn't barge into the house. I'm the one who's been giving her money to have her here. That's how much I like her. Even I was surprised by the intensity of my feelings. It was as if something I'd been holding back was suddenly released. I know it's lame, but even so, I want her here. It's my choice, so there's no reason for you, Agnes, to say anything about it. What? I don't know who you are anymore, Ken. With that, Agnes stormed out, angry. I might not be able to stay at that office anymore, but I don't care. I won't forgive anyone who hurts Megan. When I rushed over to Megan, she looked at me intently. She must have been troubled by what was said. Megan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I'd be happy if you could stay here without worrying about it. No, I'm happy, because I like you, Ken. There's no need for you to be considerate. I was surprised and looked at Megan's face. I've liked you since the first time we met. I thought you were just sympathizing with me because of my circumstances, so I'm really happy. Unbelievably, we were mutually in love. Overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events, I hugged Megan tightly, enveloped in a sense of happiness. I'm happy to. From now on, I want to be with you, Megan. Always. It was the moment I decided to protect her for the rest of my life. Following the incident with Agnes, I couldn't stay in my old office any longer, so I transferred to a local office near my parents' house, thanks to some connections from a hometown friend. Thanks to Megan keeping the house neat and tidy, the move went smoothly. This situation allowed me to keep a distance from both Agnes and Megan's mother, a real sigh of relief. What I'm most grateful for is the mutual love between my mother and Megan. My mother always treats Megan like a daughter, and for Megan, my mother is the ideal mother figure, giving her the love she never received before. She looks happy every day. Megan is currently studying to become a social worker while helping out at the office. With her keen attention to detail and exceptional work, Megan is highly regarded in the office. I'm sure she will pass her exam. A year into our relationship, Megan and I got married. Because of the situation with Megan's mother, we chose not to have a public wedding ceremony. Instead, we had a small party at our house with family. The table was lined with home-cooked meals from Megan and my mother, and a diamond ring sparkled on Megan's finger. I'm so glad that Megan agreed to marry our Ken. I now have a beautiful daughter, and I'm truly happy. I could die happy now. Mother-in-law, please don't say things like that. I've just gotten used to calling you Mom. Megan, dear. Because we moved close to my mom's house, my mother pops in more frequently than before. But with Megan around, we're always ready for her visits. I can trust Megan with the house and my mom, so it's a relief. As I savor this happiness, I am determined to work harder to bring more joy to my family. I hope you enjoyed the story. Your channel subscription would be a great source of motivation for us. See you in the next video. Running away overseas just because of a heartbreak is way too simplistic. I used to chuckle at such plots every time I saw them on TV shows. I never even imagined that fate would have something like that in store for me. I'm Alan Thompson, a businessman turning 43 this year. I work at a major sports manufacturing company, specifically in the product development department. I'm considered rather capable within the company. I was genuinely convinced that if everything stayed on track, I'd join the race for promotions at our headquarters. The one who jumbled up my destiny was a certain woman. Her name is Emily Johnson. She was in her second year of employment, still a newbie. Initially, she was in a different department, but this spring, she was transferred to the product development department where I work. Emily was someone who drew attention within the company. Her face was like that of a model, and she had the perfect figure. She was such a beauty that our public relations department asked her to model for them. On top of that, Emily was friendly towards anyone. A lot of male employees misunderstood her kindness. Who could have imagined that she would ever approach me? At that time, I was 40, and Emily was 25. We had an age gap of 15 years. On the way back from a drink with everyone at the office, Emily said she'd walk home with me because we were heading in the same direction. If we were headed the same way, I didn't mind starting to walk with her. Then, smoothly, Emily linked her arm with mine. I figured she was probably drunk. Despite being so young, she was quite physical. I walked without paying much attention, like I was soothing a child or a younger sibling. And then, Emily suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Emily had stopped while still holding onto my arm. Even when I tried to get her to respond, she just looked down and didn't reply. I thought she might be feeling sick. Worried, I leaned in to get a closer look at Emily's face. Then, something unexpected happened. Emily, standing on her tiptoes, her lips skimmed my cheek. Huh. I automatically covered the spot where she had touched me with my hand. Emily looked up at me, eyes wide as I panicked. A mischievous grin played around her lips. Aren't you a little oblivious, Ellen? Letting a girl go this far, you're not doing a very good job as a grown man. She purrs at me, leaving me too stunned to respond. As I stood there, dumbfounded, Emily, standing on her toes, whispered into my ear. Will you be my boyfriend? That's how Emily and I became a couple. News of our relationship spread quickly throughout the office. There were some jealous looks, but I was so happy that Emily was my girlfriend, I didn't care. About a year after we started dating, we began to discuss marriage. She seemed delighted by my marriage proposal, but I felt something was off about Emily's reaction. Our marriage plans weren't moving forward at all. The cause was clear. Emily was not at all cooperative when it came to marriage-related topics. She would cancel our plans to go venue hunting, saying she suddenly had urgent matters to attend to, or postpone our plans to meet her parents, claiming she was feeling unwell. Half a year after we started talking about our marriage, the topic was at a standstill. That's when I heard a disturbing rumor. Bad news usually reaches those involved last. And that's exactly what happened to me. The rumor was that Emily was cheating on me. A new employee who started in April, his name was John Davis, seemed to be quite taken with Emily. And the rumor was that Emily wasn't exactly too displeased. I wanted to believe in her, and I wanted to keep believing. But reality is cruel. I happened to stumble upon the two of them in a secret meeting. It was when I was scouring the document storage room for presentation materials with my colleague, Jim. The door to the room opened, and in came Emily and John, chuckling together. In a split second, we hid ourselves. The two of them stood closer than mere co-workers would, whispering and laughing about something. I felt like I was going to pass out. Then, Emily's words, like a dagger to my heart. I'm tired of playing nice with an old man, John. You'll keep me entertained, won't you? I've realized, just before getting married, that I can't stand elder care. In shock, I accidentally dropped the documents I was holding to the floor. Startled by the thud of the falling papers, the two of them turned to look. Emily's eyes widened as they fell on me. Unable to meet Emily's gaze, I quickly left the document room. That night, I turned off my cell phone and went to sleep. I didn't want to talk to anyone. That was all I had on my mind. The next day was Saturday, a day off from work. As soon as I turned on my cell phone, calls, texts, and emails from Emily popped up one after another. I deleted them all without reading any. It might seem cowardly, but I spent that weekend erasing all traces of Emily from my surroundings. Feeling refreshed, I went to work on Monday, devoting myself more than ever to my job. I consciously kept Emily out of my sight. Being busy meant I didn't have to think about Emily. And so, a month went by in a blink of an eye, without making time to talk to Emily. My boss seemed to know about the breakup between Emily and I, and was very considerate. It was then that the opportunity for an overseas assignment came up. It was open to anyone interested, so I immediately told my boss I want to go. Having Emily and John on the same floor was a stress for me. The overseas assignment was to New Zealand. I thought it might be nice to be free of various entanglements and face my work. In the New Zealand branch, including me, there were 8 Americans. Accommodation was provided, and though it was my first time being assigned overseas, I didn't feel inconvenienced at all. Rock climbing and free climbing were popular there. My job was to gather the information needed for the product development of these gears on site. To get the ball rolling, I had a phone number and address of a certain person, who I was told by my peer back at the headquarters to contact as soon as I arrived in New Zealand. I had finished unpacking for my moving in and was set to start at the office the next day. Without delay, I decided to reach out to this person. "Hello, this is Amy." She was American, apparently working as a guide for free climbing. She sounded younger and had a more adorable voice than I had imagined, which took me by surprise. I was introduced by Stevenson and wanted to get in touch. "My name is Alan Thompson. I hope I've got the right number for Ms. Smith." Upon hearing my words, and excited, "Oh, I've been expecting your call," came through the phone. When I mentioned that I would like to arrange a meeting soon, she promptly shared a few dates when she was available. I felt a little relieved that she seemed easy to work with. I had been worried about how I would manage if she turned out to be a difficult person to deal with. We agreed to meet at the branch office 2 days later at 3 p.m. Just as I was about to end the call with a "looking forward to meeting you then," she exclaimed, "Oh." For a moment, I was startled, wondering if I had said something to upset her. But it turned out to be a needless worry. I almost forgot to say welcome to New Zealand. I hope you enjoy your stay. With that, Amy hung up. I was taken aback and found myself holding my phone to my ear for a while, stunned. "Enjoy my stay," as I muttered to myself. A warm feeling spread in my chest. Amy Smith turned out to be younger and more petite than I had imagined. I had heard that she was 27, but wouldn't doubt it if she claimed to be a teenager. She had a clean-cut face with 3 beauty marks under her cool-looking eyes. Above all, her sun-tanned, lively smile gave me a sense of her strength as a living being on this planet. She was unlike any woman I had met before. "My name is Amy Smith. Nice to meet you." When I shook her outstretched right hand, I noticed that her fingertips were deformed. It was a climber's hand, I realized. The feel of her hand made me understand her commitment to climbing. I explained my job duties in New Zealand and sought advice from her. To which, she replied with a smile, "Why don't you give it a try? Wait, rock climbing. Can I handle it at my age? I've never done mountain climbing or bouldering before. What's more, I'm turning 43 this year. Embarrassingly enough, I'm pretty uncoordinated." Various anxieties crossed my mind. I suppose my anxieties must have been showing on my face. Amy, with an encouraging smile, reassured me. Age is irrelevant when it comes to taking on a challenge. Her casual remark left me responding with a dumbfounded huh. The very next day, I found myself looking up at a massive rock. I didn't feel like I could climb it at all. I had been briefed that it was a beginner's course, but it didn't seem like one to me. Behind me, Amy was officially getting everything ready. As I remembered my job and approached her, she looked up at me, flashing a grin. Today, forget about work and enjoy using all your senses. The tough job stuff will come later. I'd thought this since we first met, but something about Amy's smile chased away my worries. I turned back to look up at the rock. The fear I'd felt earlier was gone. In its place, a determination to make it to the top. Well, let's go easy. Amy patted my tense shoulder lightly. In that instant, I felt a wave of relaxation. Everything was going just as she planned, which made me break into a smile. My first rock climbing experience was amazing, to put it mildly. My entire body ached from muscle strain, and my sunburned skin still stung. But all of that was a comfortable kind of tired. I think I'll never forget the view I saw when I reached the top. Amy doesn't only cater to tourists from America but to people from all over the world. Apparently, she originally learned the allure of free climbing from her father and older brother. But when Amy was in middle school, her parents divorced. She ended up living with her mother. Within a year of the divorce, her mother remarried. The man she remarried was a doctor. Her mother pressured Amy into pursuing a career in medicine. Faced with high school entrance exams, Amy was torn. And then she ran away from her mother's house, determined to live her own life. She was laughing as she told me that she had run away on the day of her middle school graduation ceremony. When I went to my father's and brother's place, they had a new family and a new sister. I felt like I couldn't intrude. Over dinner, which she treated me to as a thank you for the daytime work, a slightly drunk Amy shared her life story with me. It seems she's had quite a roller coaster ride of a life. After telling me this much, Amy closed her mouth. She'll probably tell me more when the time comes. I thought as much and didn't pry any further. That night, I realized something. When the two of us are dining together, various people come up to Amy. Americans in New Zealand on working holidays, students studying abroad, local children. Plus, people who, at a glance, look like they're seasoned climbers. They all greet her with a smile, saying, "Amy." The topics of conversation are diverse. Consultations about studying abroad, relationship advice. There's also a lot of information exchange between climbers. "You're really popular." The sheer number of friends appearing one after another surprised me a bit. Well, it's kinda like my survival skills for living alone. It's important to value encounters and information. Raising her tumbler, Amy laughed. That smile was dazzling to me. Every time Amy and I met for work meetings, we were getting closer and closer. On her days off, Amy would teach me climbing. It wasn't until I tried it for myself that I felt the knowledge and information needed for product development, not just in my head but in my body too. I believe this will become my strength in the future. I can't thank my friend enough for introducing me to Amy. Then one day, a minor incident occurred. Unusually, I was working overtime, and when I got home, I found a drunk Amy passed out at the entrance of my apartment. At first, I was worried she was unwell and had fainted, but that fear was unfounded. Amy was sound asleep, breathing deeply in slumber. "Hey, Amy, you'll catch a cold. Please wake up." When I gently shook Amy, who was sleeping curled up like a cat, she groaned. It seemed she had had quite a bit to drink. There was no sign of her waking up, as she seemed to be in a deep sleep. I heard she is not a heavy drinker. The vivacious eyes that strongly impress me are hidden behind her closed eyelids and long eyelashes. Suddenly, I became interested in her beauty marks. "Can I touch it a bit?" When I whispered in her ear, Amy, still asleep, nodded like a child. Having received her permission, I carefully touched right under her eye with my index finger. From her eye back to the corner of her eye, I pressed each of the 3 regularly arranged beauty marks as if I were confirming their existence. maybe it tickled because Amy's eyelids trembled slightly. Going any further would be risky. Come on, wake up. When I tried to lift her upper body by holding her arm, a drowsy Amy clung to me. Caught off guard by the sudden event, I exclaimed, "Whoa," and tried to push Amy away from me, but she was holding on with such strength that I was unable to move. "Hey Amy, wake up. You're mistaking me for someone else." She must have mistaken me for someone else. That's what I thought, and kept telling her, "You've got the wrong person." Then suddenly, the strength in her arms gave way. She rested her forehead on my shoulder and said with a slightly hoarse voice, laughing, "You're Alan, right? Do you not like me? You never invite me. Does that mean I have no chance?" Like she was talking in her sleep, Amy said, "He's probably half asleep, I suppose." Honestly, I had noticed that she had a bit of an affection for me. And I'm aware that I'm drawn to her too. I don't want anyone telling me to consider the age difference. Amy is full of life, captivating, and honest. But I still don't have the confidence to reciprocate her feelings. Because I'm still hung up on Emily. What if I'm betrayed again? Or even if that's not the case, if Amy ends up falling for another guy and leaves me? I don't think I could bounce back from that. I know it's unfair. But I still couldn't take that step forward. That night, I put a passed-out Amy to bed and used a sleeping bag for myself. The next morning, Amy woke up panicked in an unfamiliar bed. And apparently, she was suffering from a horrible hangover. "You were sleeping by the door." When I explained what had happened last night to Amy, still panicking, her face quickly turned red. "I'm so sorry for the trouble." She immediately bowed deeply on the bed. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight, finding it hilarious. Usually calm Amy panicking was just too adorable. Since I was laughing so much, Amy, after lifting her head, puffed out her cheeks in a sulk. "Let's go grab some breakfast," I said, wiping the tears of laughter from my eyes. The loud growling sound came from Amy's stomach, and we both burst out laughing. Half a year had passed since I was transferred to New Zealand. My climbing skills have improved more than I could have imagined. Work is going well, and this branch office has become a topic of discussion at the headquarters meetings. I'm really glad that I came here. Such peaceful days passed for about 2.5 years, and I had completely acclimated to this country. Work was going smoothly, and my days were without complaint. Then, one day, an incident occurred. I received a message that Amy had been involved in a climbing accident. A guide, knowing I was close to her, had the thoughtfulness to notify me. I checked the hospital she was taken to and gripped my car keys with trembling hands. Seeing my state, the branch manager kindly offered to drive instead. He was probably worried that my shaken state might cause an accident. When we arrived at the hospital, a few familiar guides were standing in front of the emergency treatment room. They all had somber expressions, staring at the treatment room door. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to leap out of my mouth. One of the guides noticed me and beckoned me over. As I ran to him, he informed me that Amy is safe. Immediately, I felt all my strength drain away and I slumped onto a nearby bench. Apparently, Amy had sustained minor injuries, but her climbing partner was critically injured. A woman and child, who seemed to be the partner's family, came running down the hall in a frantic state. Just then, the treatment room door opened, and Amy emerged, with bandages wrapped around her left hand and head. She had a cut above her eye, which was a little swollen. Surrounded by her fellow guides, she kept repeating, "I'm okay." She then anxiously looked back at the treatment room door. It seemed her partner was still unconscious. Amy bowed deeply to the partner's family that had rushed over. Then, she hugged the worried children tightly. From a distance, I watched Amy explain the situation of the accident to the partner's wife in a calm manner. The partner's wife seemed strong, and it appeared as if she was consoling Amy instead. After finishing her explanations, Amy noticed my presence. I believe over 30 minutes had passed. Seeing my face, Amy's calm expression crumbled. It looked as though a string of tension had snapped. "Are you hurting? Are you okay?" When I asked her, Amy sank down next to me, drained of energy. "I wish it had been me who fell." In a strained whisper, Amy murmured. She said if she, who had neither family or anything to lose, had fallen, there wouldn't have been a problem. With tears streaming down her face, Amy told me it would be hard for her seriously injured partner to recover. I still don't understand how brutal that is. Amy was heavily burdened with the responsibility of having climbed together. I hesitated, unsure of what to say, seeing her so distraught for the first time. "I worry if you get hurt, Amy, so right now, I'm truly relieved you're safe. Just remember there's someone who feels this way about you." I didn't know if my words reached Amy. She cried incessantly, and I just waited next to her until she stopped. There was one thing I learned from this incident: that Amy was irreplaceable to me. I was still figuring out how to accept that fact. 3 days after Amy's fall, shockwaves hit our New Zealand branch. I was ordered to return to headquarters. It was true, 2 years had passed since I came here. I had made decent achievements at work. But honestly, I was confused by the sudden order. There were still ongoing projects, but the order from the headquarters was absolute. It's not possible to refuse a return to headquarters. Before returning to America, I had a decision to make. It was about Amy. Ever since I arrived here, her presence in my life had grown larger and larger. The only thing stopping me from taking the next step was me. There's a thought Amy has, accepting our somewhat distant relationship. Since her job is dangerous, she doesn't want to make anyone extra special in her life. I once overheard her discussing this with another guide. But perhaps it's time for both of us to settle down. Today is a day off. I had promised Amy to go rock climbing together. After that, I planned to ask her, would you come to America with me? I was convinced that Amy would nod in agreement. In the end, on this day, I was too concerned about that matter and couldn't concentrate on climbing. "You'll get hurt if you climb like that. You should stay down watching today, Alan." Seeing my distraction, Amy declared so. I thought indeed, Amy was right. I decided to watch from the base of the big rock as Amy began her ascent. It was a solo climb, so Amy switched to free climbing. She only used safety gear and conquered the rock with her skill, physical strength, and intuition. Watching Amy's climbing, it seemed surprisingly light. She seems to climb effortlessly, smoothly. She's not a power climber who ascends with brute arm strength. She uses the flexibility and timing of her whole body, concentrating her strength on one point to climb. Where to extend her hand, where to place her foot, where to move her body next. Her hands don't seem to hesitate, as if everything has been inputted. Most of all, I think Amy looks truly happy when she faces the rock, wearing a great smile. I had no choice but to revise my selfish thoughts. Wanting her to come back to America with me was just my ego. I can't take away her purpose in life. Climbing is Amy's life itself. I was reminded of that fact once more. When Amy reached the top, she waved her hand, saying, "That was awesome." While waving back, I muttered, "This is goodbye." A week later, I returned to America without telling Amy anything. I thought it was better that way. Our lives had intersected only briefly, and now our paths were diverging greatly again. I convinced myself that that is all it is. When I returned to the headquarters, I was surprised at how much had changed. I was shocked to find that Emily, whom I thought for sure had married John and retired, was still in the same department at the headquarters. And her last name hadn't changed. Apparently, she had been dumped by John quite early on. It must have been a fling from the start. After that, Emily gave birth to John's child on her own. A colleague told me that she became a single mother and was raising the child. The reason John is nowhere to be seen seems to be because Emily pleaded with her boss. She was furious with John, who refused to acknowledge the child. She revealed everything to the directors. That John had toyed with her and dumped her just before they were supposed to get married. No man could refuse Emily's pleas as she sobbed her accusations. As a result, John was demoted. It seems that a lot had happened while I was out of the loop. Upon my return to our headquarters, I was promoted to assistant department manager. I had earned a promotion. Far from being jealous, my colleagues were genuinely happy for me, as if it were their own success. I resolved to live up to the expectations of my supportive colleagues no matter what. Our department's unity felt stronger than ever at my boisterous welcome party. Next to me at the feast, slid into a chair, was Emily. I was greeted by a nostalgic scent of perfume. Her beauty remained stunning as always. It was strange to think that she's now a mother of one. "Long time no see. Have you forgiven me yet?" she asked me, holding her beer and looking up at me with half-closed eyes. She seemed a bit drunk, snuggling onto me, making me feel uncomfortable. "I let that go a long time ago. You should too." And I meant it. Emily no longer held any place in my heart. To forgive or not to forgive, it didn't matter anymore. She had become that kind of presence to me. But it seemed Emily interpreted my reply to her liking. As she grinned a bit and said, "So," she scooted closer to me. "Why don't we start over? You haven't forgotten about me, have you?" At these unexpected words, I felt more repulsed than pleased. Emily looked up at me, clearly not expecting to be rejected. "I've found someone else over at New Zealand. Sorry," I said, pushing Emily away. Then, Emily scoffed at me. "You didn't bring her back with you, did you? Isn't that just a fleeting romance?" Emily was still confident that I loved her. The sight of Emily clinging to that thought started to seem pitiful to me. That's the result of me respecting her way of life. That's how I show my love. You might not understand. Emily widened her eyes in surprise at my words, and then bit her lip in frustration. She must have wanted to retort but couldn't, and was frustrated about it. Having realized that I would not sway, Emily blurted out, "Are you nuts?" and stormed out of the party. Oddly enough, I felt a sense of relief. Something that had been stuck in my throat seemed to have finally cleared. Feeling a little lightheaded, I took out my cell and sent a text to Amy. "Sorry for flying back without saying anything. I wish I could see you right now. Long distance isn't my thing, but don't you think we can make it work?" The next morning, nursing a hangover, I checked my cell to find a reply from Amy. "Come to see me at least once a year." It was a short message, typical of Amy. "We may get married someday, or we might not. But I probably won't marry anyone other than Amy. A marriage certificate is just a piece of paper. We have our own way of doing things. And that's what I plan to explore with Amy from now on." My name is Matthew Johnson, and I'm turning 32 this year. I work as a mental health counselor in the psychiatric ward in a general hospital. This psychiatric ward is very popular, and every day, lots of patients come to visit. The outpatient department is always packed with appointments. Since I'm a counselor, I don't perform any medical examinations. I can't administer treatments or prescribe medications. My role is to assist doctors and patients for psychological tests based on their needs. I've been at this hospital for 2 years now, and there's been a constant cycle of new counselors joining and leaving. It's perpetually short-staffed. Of course, today the appointments are packed as well. So, Dr. William Smith, who is in charge of today's outpatients, was in a terrible mood. William and I are the same age, but our personalities are the complete opposites, according to the nurses. He takes pride in having graduated from an elite medical school and lords his education over new arrivals. In medical school, there are cliques, and there's no denying that one's alma mater is highly regarded, more so than regular colleges. Even though he's skilled, his arrogant attitude had a bad reputation from the patients. Dr. Johnson, since the appointments are packed today, please make sure to stick to the counseling schedule, says the nurse, Linda Thompson, holding the records of patients scheduled for today's counseling. She drops the documents onto my desk, emphasizing, please be punctual. Apparently, my counseling sessions are famous for taking a long time. I become so engrossed in dealing seriously with the patients that I forget about time. Little gestures and choices of words, psychological tests, and other aspects are crucial in understanding the inner workings of a patient's mind, so I cannot overlook even the smallest signs. Trust with the patients is also essential. Many patients who come to the clinic have emotional scars, especially teenagers brought in by their parents. Nowadays, even elementary school children come to the clinic. It's a hard world to live in, I suppose. I'm doing my best to help them as well. And that often leads me to run over time. The nurses are constantly complaining, and I truly feel bad about that, but what can I do? In this respect, William doesn't miss a beat. When he's in charge of outpatient care, his decisions are quick, and his instructions to the nurses are spot on. He's highly rated among the staff. William and I are apparently referred to as the odd couple of psychiatry behind our backs. Put yourself in my shoes, Matthew, having to deal with complaints from the other nurses. Nurse Linda is my girlfriend. Everyone in the hospital knows about our relationship, so any grievances people can't tell me directly all get funneled to her. I'm really sorry, I'll be more careful, I say, lowering my head as if praying to Linda. Linda laughs softly and lightly strokes my head. I met her at this hospital. From the first time I met her, her brightness with a touch of shadow somewhere intrigued me. I just couldn't help but be drawn to her. I was the one who asked her out, and the one who wooed her. It took 2 whole months from our first date to the start of our relationship because it was Linda's first time. She's like the sun in this ward, radiating positivity. So patients and colleagues adore her. It seems the outpatient services have begun, and the presence of people bustling in the hallways has become more noticeable. It's going to be a busy day again. I checked the time on my wristwatch and called out to the corridor, "Come on in." This is the signal for today's battle to begin. Somehow, I managed to smoothly handle the counseling sessions, and so far, the nurses haven't gotten angry with me for running late. At lunch, I breathe a sigh of relief. In the break room, I ate the lunch that Linda prepared for me. The daily highlight is this homemade lunch. Just as I'm settling down to enjoy it, William walks in. He was biting into a sweet bun while holding another pastry in his hand. "It's something proper, that's not nutritious at all," I said. I think the phrase "an unhealthy doctor" was invented for William. "I don't have time to fuss over making a packed lunch like you," he replies. Pulling the metal chair back roughly, William let out a big sigh as he sat down. Something must have gone wrong in his morning consultations. Something happened. In response to my inquiry, William slowly chewed his bread, seemingly lost in thought. He's probably deciding whether to tell me or not. "If it's about a patient, I'd like you to share the information." I pushed him a bit since he seemed hesitant, and William finally opened his mouth. "A patient with a referral letter from a university professor is coming. Apparently has aphonia, but I don't know the cause. It seems to be a patient requested by William's mentor." which means failure is not an option. Aphonia is a conversion disorder where the voice is lost due to emotional stress or mental trauma. It's one symptom of a mental illness. Psychological therapy, medication, counseling, and various approaches are necessary. Of course, voice training will probably be involved as well. The professor specifically named you. Why? Have any connections with the university? I see. So that's what he wanted to know. I don't know, maybe it's a referral from someone. There aren't many psychological counselors out here. I explained to him that I don't know the professor and have no connections with the university. He still looked unconvinced, but a nurse came to call William, and our conversation ended. As the afternoon consultations began, so did my counseling. I realized that a new appointment had been squeezed into what should have been my break time. Probably, this was the patient William was talking about. Age 18, name Caitlin Miller. Recently, she lost her family in a traffic accident. The symptoms of aphonia appeared right after that. She was also in the car at the time of the accident. A survivor of the accident, that is. The mental stress from the shock of the accident must be the cause. William's examination was over, and the young woman who sat before me, Caitlin, looked more mature than her age. Her neatly trimmed bands seemed to express a strong will. I'm your psychological counselor, Matthew Johnson. I'll be asking you a few questions. Just point to one of these cards, will you? I placed 3 cards in front of her labeled yes, no, and neither, and began asking questions. She calmly answered my inquiries without any hesitation, all throughout. She didn't seem to be in any doubt. Sometimes, I can quickly understand a patient during our first counseling session, but it seemed like my relationship with this young woman was going to take longer. Caitlin came in for counseling once a week. She always arrived promptly. During our 3rd counseling session, I was taken aback when I saw the number of medications prescribed by William. Psychiatric drug therapy tends to involve a lot of medication. I've always thought that it puts a significant burden on the patient. I believe William prescribed these to help her rest her body and mind, but this won't work. It's like sweeping the problem under the rug. I decided to talk to William about it. William, don't you think this prescription is a bit much? It might be hard on her body. William cut me off and stood up from his chair, confronting me. He seemed to be in a bad mood. Don't challenge a medical doctor with your counseling credentials. Just do as I've instructed. Few people know it, but William is a highly responsible person. He's too much of a perfectionist. Caitlin's treatment isn't progressing as he'd hoped, and he's getting frustrated. Stop taking your anger out on me. She doesn't have insomnia, and her mood isn't fluctuating. She doesn't need these. I showed him the results of the psychological tests and explained. I really think what she needs is someone to understand her. I'm frustrated by my own limitations, and I still haven't fully grasped her inner world. Look, Matthew, you're fine with your laid-back approach. I'm different. This patient was referred by my college mentor. I have to meet his expectations quickly. Do you understand this pressure? He slammed his cup down on the desk, unable to conceal his anger and impatience. I don't understand the weight that he carries. But I thought that our desire to heal her was the same. He glared at me, and with that, William left the room. Linda, who came into the room in exchange, saw the cup that had been knocked over and had a surprised look on her face. What's the matter, Dr. Smith again? Occasionally, William and I clash. The nurses are used to it. It's about Caitlin Miller's treatment. I think William is rushing too much. I think we should take a more compassionate approach. As soon as I mentioned Caitlin Miller's name, Linda's cheerful face clouded over. She began to wipe the table somewhat roughly. There was a vibe that she had something to say to me. Linda, what's the matter? I gently spoke, touching Linda's arm, only to be brushed away with strong force. This had never happened before. Linda seemed surprised at her strength as well and softly apologized to me, saying sorry. I don't want to say this, but, prefacing her statement that way, Linda expressed her dissatisfaction to me. She seemed worried that I was becoming too engrossed in Caitlin Miller's treatment. Though trust hasn't been fully established yet, I could feel that Caitlin was interested in me. She would show up at the hospital even on non-counseling days, and she'd borrow books from my shelf. Our counseling sessions always run over time. Recently, even when I'm with Linda, Caitlin often becomes the topic of conversation. I've got a lot bottled up inside because of her, Linda said, coming closer to me. Lately, we haven't been spending much time together, just the two of us. I certainly understand what Linda wants to say. What? Here. I couldn't take my eyes off Linda as she approached. She sat down next to me, bringing her face closer. I've got a lot bottled up inside. Complaints. I'll explode if I don't vent. You're going to listen today. Don't run away, she declared, pointing at me. I'd been neglecting to care for the most important person. I might really be qualified as a counselor. That evening, Linda's complaints were heard in my room, and an apologetic meeting was held, with me bowing my head over and over. Linda made me drink like crazy, and I was hungover the next day. Fortunately, I had no appointments in the morning. I slowly drank my coffee while checking Caitlin Miller's psychological test results. I thought I might be overlooking something significant. If the initial approach is wrong, no progress will be made. Suddenly, as I looked at the psychological test results, the words that William said yesterday crossed my mind. My intuition started to buzz, telling me, this is it. I checked her family structure, her parents' and siblings' history, and the position she was in. The misunderstanding had been there from the very beginning. I trusted that intuition, and during the counseling, I asked her, "The loss of your voice wasn't because of that unfortunate accident, was it?" At my words, she opened her eyes wide. And then she nodded vigorously. "You don't play the piano anymore." Looking at her neatly extended fingertips, done with gel nails, I asked her. Then she tightly clenched her fingertips and nodded. Caitlin had been called a piano prodigy since she was 3 years old. Her name is listed in competitions. She had started walking down the path of a musician at a young age. But at some point, her presence had vanished. Whether it was due to the typical adolescent mind, or she felt her limits, that is something only she knows. She could no longer play the piano like before. Caitlin, who had been raised with high expectations, may have been playing the piano just to meet the expectations of adults. And Caitlin's heart was broken. Around the same time, it was decided that her brother would study abroad as a special soccer student. Probably, that was when she developed mutism. Your parents hid the fact that you lost your voice from those around them, didn't they? At my question, she nods. She had been absent from school for over 6 months. And this was the evidence that her parents tried to hide the fact that she had become mute. Her parents were said to be perfectionists. Suddenly, Caitlin stands up and headed to the whiteboard. And with a flowing motion, she runs her pen across it. Being unable to speak is shameful. Having a child with a disability is embarrassing. Written neatly on the whiteboard, these were probably words thrown at Caitlin by her parents. I thought that I had no value if I couldn't play the piano, and that I shouldn't exist. She wrote this and turned towards me, smiling with a grin. Caitlin's smile looked as if she was crying. "That's not true at all. It'll be okay. Let's get your voice back together. I'm here for you." At my words, Caitlin tried to respond by opening her mouth. Her voice still didn't come out, but I could hear the breath escaping her throat. With vocal training, she can regain her voice. First, I thought it was important to make her feel like talking again, to take care of her heart. That evening, It seems that William got wind of Caitlin trying to speak herself. With a joyful face, he forcibly hugged me and started thumping my chest. Ouch. I feel like I understand why the professor picked you. I respect your skills as a psychological counselor, and from now on, I won't make fun of you for not having a medical license. William said this, laughing. The professor spilled the beans. At my words, he grinned mischievously. It seems he heard from the professor that I had a medical license. I had hidden my medical license because I wanted to focus on my work as a psychological counselor. Now you can work even harder, Matthew. I'm counting on you. True to his words, William stopped ridiculing me as he used to. He started consulting me about the treatment plan and began to listen to the psychological test results and process. Lately, there are even rumors among the patients that William has become kinder. In the midst of all this, Caitlin's treatment for mutism was gradually progressing. I was doing my best to accompany her in voice exercises and was always there to talk through her concerns. I have become almost like a brother to her. She had lost her parents and younger brother and must have felt lonely. She seems to think of me as a brother too. While Caitlin and I were communicating by writing in the counseling room, there was a knock and Linda came in. She frowned at the whiteboard filled with our conversation. Doctor, you're running way over time. Caitlin isn't your only patient. And Caitlin, don't monopolize Dr. Johnson all to yourself. It was clear that Linda was taking her frustrations out on us. She said it with a laugh, but her eyes weren't smiling. Moreover, she turned to Caitlin, who was slightly bowing her head, and said something unbelievable in a barely audible voice. What's wrong with your great parents? Isn't this a bit excessive? Besides, I think that was a slip of the tongue. But it was something she should have never said. Linda, stop. I quickly cut her off. I hoped Caitlin hadn't heard, but the look on Caitlin's face when she looked up was very stern. She had clearly heard Linda's words. And she glared at Linda, trying to make a sound. But all that came from her throat was a soft wheezing sound. Caitlin tapped the whiteboard in frustration. To calm herself down, she took a deep breath and slowly opened her mouth. Great parents aren't always the best parents. It was a terribly raspy, broken voice, but it was the first time Caitlin had spoken in front of us. She still couldn't speak for long, so she scribbled on the whiteboard and slapped it as if to say, "Read this." I wasn't loved. My parents only loved my talent. I was alone. Caitlin's eyes, as she glared at Linda, were deadly serious. This must be the truth. Noticing Caitlin's intense gaze, Linda snapped back to reality and whispered a small "I'm sorry." Caitlin, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have imposed my own opinions on you. You see, my mother was a bit mentally ill. She was a very vague person, and sometimes she understood me, but other times she didn't. Linda said she hated her mother. She lamented her circumstances while caring for her ailing mother, wondering why she had to suffer this fate. Children can't choose their parents, can they? With those words, Linda began to shed tears. Caitlin looked at Linda, her face expressionless. But you've grown up to be a fine adult. I believe that's proof that your mom loved you. Caitlin wrote largely on the whiteboard. Reading those words, Linda broke down crying. You're right, that's true. Mom was trying so hard to love me, fighting her illness, and trying so hard. At this moment, Linda recalled a family outing that her mother had attended just once. She remembered how her mother had gone to the hospital several days before, trying to hold herself together just for that one day. And how she had prepared a packed lunch for Linda early in the morning. Linda couldn't stop the tears as she remembered. Besides, you have Dr. Johnson by your side. With a raspy, small voice, Caitlin's expression was very gentle as she told Linda this. Linda wiped her tears and smiled back at her. Thank you, Caitlin. I remembered something important. Linda responded, and Caitlin nodded contentedly. Caitlin's treatment continued to progress smoothly, and she soon forgot she had ever suffered from selective mutism. Today was the last day of counseling. William was also there to see her off at the entrance. It seemed he couldn't poorly treat a patient who was sent from a university professor. At the entrance, Caitlin bowed. And then she looked up at me, smiling mischievously. "What?" I asked, sensing she had something to say. "Dr. Smith, Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for everything. And Miss Thompson, thank you too," Caitlin began, her words filled with gratitude. William scratched his head, looking a little embarrassed. "Dr. Johnson, please be sure to invite me to your wedding with Miss Thompson. Let me play the piano," she continued. At this, Linda and I exchanged glances, both of us more embarrassed than anything else. Caitlin's face was beaming with joy. Linda looked down, seeming embarrassed. Then, next to her, William exclaimed in astonishment. Wait, you two are in that kind of relationship, huh?" We were all surprised at his words. The fact that we were dating was well known within the hospital. We were astonished by William's obliviousness to this fact. "Dr. Smith, you'd better fix your cluelessness, or you'll never find a wife. See you later." With these sharp words, Caitlin smiled sweetly. William, his shoulders slumped in disappointment, weakly waved to Caitlin. I casually took Linda's hand. People are all different, and it's those differences that make it interesting. And if we lack something, we can always make it up for each other. What should I say in my proposal? Looking at Linda's blushing face, I pledged in my heart to take good care of her. "Is there anything I can do to thank you?" With those words from her, I took advantage and made a single request. When I told her what it was, she blushed slightly and looked down. Then she said quietly, "I have no reason to refuse." Her eyes were a bit moist, and her voice was trembling. "I am Mike Johnson, 30 years old. I'm laid back and also a ridiculously timid person. I've had opportunities for promotion at this age, but I'm not suited for management due to my personality, so I've turned them down. I'm happy to continue living peacefully as a regular employee. My parents back in rural Nebraska are rushing me to get married, asking if I found someone nice, but unfortunately, there is no one I would consider marrying, and I haven't had a significant other in a long time. The only thing that comforts me, a workaholic, isn't a woman, but the houseplants that are gradually increasing in my room. At first, I just wanted some greenery in my room, but as I placed the plants and took care of them, seeing them thrive, I realized it calmed my soul. Now my room is filled with plants. Taking pictures of the plants is also one of my joys. So, while it's not glamorous, my personal life is peaceful and my work is going well. However, there was a recent change at work. A female colleague named Susan Miller transferred to my department. Susan is 35, 5 years older than me. She has a good sales record and is rumored to be a rising star among her peers. In addition, being the most beautiful woman in the company is a well-known story. Beautiful and competent, she has it all, but for some reason, she isn't married. Maybe she's out of everyone's league, so the male employees can't even approach her. I won't lie and say I'm not interested. But we've been in different departments, and I haven't talked to her much. Like me, Susan seems to struggle with socializing. She gets her work done officially, but I've never seen her chatting with others. My coworkers also don't know how to approach her, so there's a wall between Susan and everyone else. As we'll be working together, I hope we can at least make small talk. That was during a usual weekend when I was admiring my houseplants at home. I was transplanting potted plants on the balcony when a single piece of paper fluttered down from above. I picked it up, thinking it was something, but it turned out not to be paper but a thin paper bag containing plant seeds. It probably came flying down from the floor above, but should I return it or not? While I was wondering what to do, the doorbell rang. I thought I knew who dropped the bag, so without checking who it was, I opened the door. But the next moment, I froze on the spot. It seemed the other person was the same, as we stood silently facing each other for a while. Susan. To my soft murmur, the person in front of me answered yes. The one who rang my doorbell was my attractive senior at work, Susan, whom I had recently begun working with. Her hair, usually tied up at work, was loosely hanging over her shoulders. Perhaps because it was the weekend, and she was dressed in a relaxed dress, without her usual glasses. I dropped the bag of seeds and came to get it. I had no idea that you lived downstairs, Susan said, seemingly surprised. It's not unreasonable. I was surprised too. Such coincidences do happen, don't they? Later, Susan told me that she had moved into this apartment building 3 months ago. Since Susan and I had different off-duty times before transfer, we hadn't run into each other. And I tend to stay at home on my days off. While we were both surprised by the coincidence, I returned the bag of seeds to Susan. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I was planting seeds in the planters on the balcony and accidentally let the bag of seeds be carried away by the wind. I was glad to hear that, because I felt a sense of familiarity. I was also transplanting pots on the balcony. You like gardening, growing plants too, Susan. Yes, I love houseplants and keep them in my room. Oh. Maybe that one is in my room too. Susan pointed at the small houseplant I had placed by the entrance. From there, we talked about the potted plants we were growing. I was surprised to learn that Susan lived upstairs, but even more surprised that she, who always seemed to put up walls and worked methodically, was talking so much and so lively. Especially when talking about plants, she had such a soft and gentle expression. Seeing her like that, I thought she was adorable. There seems to be a gap between her work and private life, and I think that's what attracted me to her. From that day on, Susan and I began to communicate privately as well. Although most of our conversation was about plants. But it was a lot of fun exchanging information about plant shops and growing methods through messaging. One day, she expressed interest in a large houseplant in my room. So I invited her over. Knowing that we were only going to talk about hobbies, I was still nervous to invite a woman into my room. As a thank you for inviting her, she brought some sweets. The way she can be so thoughtful makes her even more wonderful, I thought, and I probably had romantic feelings for her. I began to realize my feelings. I was staring absent-mindedly at Susan in my room when she muttered, "Camera. My SLR camera is sitting in my line of sight." I do a bit with the camera too. I take pictures of houseplants and post them on my blog. It's fun, and it's a way to connect with fellow plant lovers. Really now? She said that, but she seemed more fascinated by the plants in the room than the camera. After privately talking with Susan for a while, I suddenly received a request from a beautiful colleague. The beautiful colleague, of course, is Susan. "I'm going on a business trip for a month. Can you stay at my place during that time?" I was indeed puzzled by this. Just because we'd been talking more didn't mean I could stay at her place. Seeing my troubled face, Susan continued with a smile. "I'm sorry for springing this on you. I was half joking about the living part. You don't have to stay. But while I'm away, I'd like you to take care of my plants. Some can be left alone for a while, but others need frequent care. This is my first time being away so long, and I'm really at a loss. My parents live out of state, so they can't come help." I felt relieved upon hearing that. Apparently, she doesn't have friends she can casually ask to take care of them. I know what kind of plants she has in her room, and I understand how to take care of them. Plus, Susan's house is right above mine, so it's easy to get there. But isn't it careless to let a man into a woman's apartment? I thought, but she reassured me by saying, "You're the only one I can ask. I'd trust you." I was pleased with those words. It wasn't that she was asking just anyone, but that she trusted me specifically to ask for my help. She persisted, and in the end, I agreed. I did it because she was in trouble, nothing more. It's definitely not because I was asked by the beautiful colleague I have a soft spot for, looking up to me. The night Susan went on her business trip, I, who had been entrusted with a spare key, headed to her house. Entering a woman's home when she wasn't there was a first for me, and I was filled with trepidation. Inside the room, there were as many houseplants or more as in my room. Each leaf was lush, and the stems were strong. It showed that she was taking good care of them. Previously, Susan had mentioned that she collected a lot of books about plants. She had told me that I could look at anything on her bookshelf when I visited during her trip, so I immediately checked to see what books were there. That's when I noticed a handwritten notebook mixed in with the books. Upon flipping through it, I realized it was Susan's notebook summarizing the characteristics and care methods of her plants. From the number of books and the contents of her notebook, I could tell that Susan wasn't just fond of plants, but was studying them to take care properly. I've grown various plants, starting with houseplants, but I never really studied them in depth. But as I looked through Susan's notebook, I began to enjoy it, and I became engrossed in reading her plant books and her compiled notebook in her room while she was away on business. I learned many new things, and it was exciting to have knowledge pouring into me. It was interesting and stimulating for me. I thought I was just going to take care of her plants in her place, but I ended up enjoying thrilling days beyond my imagination. When Susan came back, she thanked me for taking care of them, but I told her that I should be the one thanking her. I learned a lot and had even more fun growing plants. Hearing my words, Susan gave me a soft smile. My heart raced at her soft smile, softer than I had ever seen. No, I should be the one thanking you, Green Man. When she said that, my heart skipped a beat. Green Man is the name I use when posting pictures of plants on my blog. I write about their features and how to grow them, almost like a diary. I started it just to keep a record for myself, but sometimes I get comments from fellow plant enthusiasts. I've been writing since I was young because it allows me to connect with people who share the same hobby. I had told Susan about writing the blog, but I hadn't told her that I write under the name Green Man. I wonder how she knew. As I was thinking this, Susan told me a story about something that happened at a company she used to work for. It was a so-called toxic workplace that imposed a harsh environment with bullying, unpaid overtime, and no holidays. Apparently, she became physically and mentally worn down because of it. That was when I discovered Green Man's blog. I've always liked plants but never had the time to grow them myself. The pictures of plants on the blog and the peaceful diaries of living with them were healing for me. I read it almost every day. I had no idea Susan had such a past. I've also been in a situation where I became depressed because my relationship with my boss at my previous company didn't go well. Growing plants was part of my therapy for depression. I was so weakened, I sent a message to Green Man on his blog, "Work is hard, and I don't have time to be healed by plants," and he replied, "Quit your job, and let's be healed by plants together." Hearing that, my memory came flooding back. I had indeed had such an exchange on my blog. Since she was talking about how hard it was to go to work, I couldn't see it as someone else's problem. I myself couldn't quit my job due to anxiety, but once I quit, I realized that both my mind and body were becoming healthier. There's no need to be crushed by the company, so if it's tough, it's better to get out early. That's what I thought. Back then, I was told by my parents and those around me to try a little harder, but no matter how hard I tried, the situation didn't get any better. The first person to tell me that I could quit was Green Man, and I was glad, and I felt really relieved. So I quit the company right away. I wanted to send a thank you message, but I left a dark message, so it felt awkward to send another one. But I'm really glad I quit my old job. It's all thanks to you, Mike. Thank you. No, I also wondered how the person who gave me that message was doing. It was you, Susan. I'm relieved. How did you figure out that green man was me? She seemed to have guessed by looking at the cameras and desk calendar when she came to my room. I hadn't noticed, but apparently, the things in my room and the desk calendar were often captured in the photos I posted on my blog. She still didn't seem to be sure, but when I wrote on my blog that I was taking care of a friend's plants for a month while she was on a business trip, that seemed to be the deciding factor. I'm grateful that she still checks my blog, but I feel a little anxious, thinking that a woman who has feelings for me is reading it. What if I wrote something strange? But other than that, I felt nothing but joy. A person who was troubled like me was able to move forward because of my words. And she has become a fellow plant lover. I felt that the fact that my blog, which started as a hobby, had become something I could push people to do, would give me confidence. I am so grateful to you. Thanks to you, I now have time to be healed by plants, and my days are very peaceful. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything you want? At those words, I jumped at the chance. I thought it was a chance to convey my feelings. I don't know if I'll have an opportunity like this to talk at length again. I want you to let me express my feelings. I like you. The time I spend with you feels good, and I was happy to see a smile that I don't often see at work. I'm glad you entrusted me with taking care of the plants, and I liked your studiousness. It made me recognize again that it's just like you. I want to date you, but I don't want to use the word thanks. So, if you don't want to, please refuse me clearly. That's my request. Susan listened to my confession with a surprised expression. But when she finished listening, she firmly responded. Why would I refuse? It's more of a reward for me, since I feel the same way. Her cheeks were slightly red as she said this. I didn't care what I looked like. I was so happy I struck a victory pose. Seeing me, she burst out laughing. Our relationship was going well, and there were changes at work too. She had been consulting me about communicating better with her colleagues. It seemed that her shyness was the cause of the perceived barrier between her and those around her. So I suggested to her that we put some houseplants in the office and make it a talking point. I had heard before that colleagues wanted something green, something soothing in the office. With everyone's consent, Susan and I took the initiative to place and take care of indoor plants. The cool-looking Susan turned out to love plants, and she became very talkative about them. Colleagues started talking to her more often. Susan herself seemed to enjoy the conversations with others. Her smiles increased at the office, and I couldn't be happier. Mike, you always push my back, thank you. Her smile, now, is my greatest comfort. I used to think that only plants could heal. I've found a comfort greater than plants, and I'm deeply and truly content.